The abolitionist movement was the result of a series of reasons that, little by little, led humanity to understand that slavery should be no more. Religious reasons, humanitarian reasons, economic reasons, and social reasons all had their impact on the abolitionist movement. And all these reasons did not appear suddenly. They were the result of centuries of struggle. All these reasons are interconnected and cannot be understood separately from one another. But let us analyze each one individually so you can understand how they led to the end of slavery. The first reason we must mention is the religious one. It came mainly from Christian churches and sects, such as the Quakers, who took the Bible literally and understood that the Old Testament God was against slavery. After reading Leviticus, Exodus, and Deuteronomy, they said that the New Testament Jesus Christ reiterated those ideas and told them to stop being accomplices to the slaveholders. For example, the Quakers were some of the first Christians to condemn slavery and actively work for its abolition in the 18th century. They argued that slavery contradicted the core principles of Christianity, including the belief in the inherent dignity and equality of all people, the Golden Rule, and the call to love one's neighbor as oneself. In addition to the Christians, Enlightenment ideas also emerged, which elevated the principles of liberty and equality, exerting intellectual pressure on the slavery system. Enlightenment thinkers like James Oglethorpe, who was an English landowner and philanthropist, argued that slavery was incompatible with natural rights and that all humans were born free. Another person was Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, who argued that slavery violated the inherent worth of every human being and that it was morally unacceptable to treat another human being as a property. Another very important reason that contributed to the abolitionist movement was the legal actions taken throughout history against slavery. These actions undermined the legitimacy of the system in the eyes of the law and provided a basis for the abolitionist movement. One example of this was the Somerset case in Britain in 1772, when a slave named Somerset was brought before the English court because his owner wanted to take him back to Jamaica. Lord Mansfield, the Chief Justice of England, ruled that slavery was not recognized in English law, making Mansfield's decision an important legal victory against slavery. His decision contributed to the growing abolitionist sentiment in Britain, and it helped pave the way for the eventual end of slavery in the British Empire in 1833. But without a doubt, the main reason that slavery ended was the economic factor. Slavery turned out to be an economically inefficient system compared to free labor. At the end of the day, slaves were human beings who needed food, clothing, and shelter just like anyone else. Also, slaves could not work at all times and needed rest, unlike machines or robots. Additionally, since slaves were treated like objects rather than human beings, slave owners often failed to provide necessary medical care, which resulted in decreased productivity. Furthermore, as the industrial economy developed, there was an increased demand for skilled workers, which made it more difficult to maintain a system that severely limited the abilities of those in slavery. Many economists and business people realized that free labor was more productive and flexible than slave labor, which led them to support the abolition of slavery. Finally, let's talk about the humanitarian and social issue. The humanitarian and social issue was a very powerful weapon in the fight to end slavery. It became increasingly difficult to defend slavery as the world learned more about the inhumane treatment of enslaved people. Books, pamphlets, and newspapers exposed the horrors of slavery, which shocked many readers and caused them to question the morality of the institution. One example of this was the book Things as They Are, or The Power of Slavery, published by a British abolitionist in 1823. This book included first-hand accounts of the brutal realities of slavery in the American South, which outraged many readers in Britain and contributed to the growing abolitionist movement there. The humanitarian and social issue also found voice in the narratives of formerly enslaved people who shared their stories of resilience and resistance. One example of this was the narrative of Frederick Douglass, who escaped from slavery and became a leading abolitionist. His autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, published in 1845, is considered a masterpiece of American literature and played a significant role in shaping public opinion on slavery. It was during the late 18th century that the movement began to emerge strongly in Europe and North America. Northern states began to enact gradual emancipation laws starting in 1780. The following century saw the movement expand to many other countries. In 1807, the United Kingdom prohibited the slave trade. In the same year, the United States prohibited the importation of slaves. In America, the movement gained momentum from the 1830s to the 1860s. Leaders like Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison played key roles. However, there were different views within the movement. While some like William Lloyd Garrison demanded immediate and total abolition, others like those in the American Anti-Slavery Society believed that gradualism would lead to the same result. Therefore, it is necessary to study the various strategies used by the abolitionists and the controversies that arose within the movement. Frederick Douglass, who was born into slavery and escaped, became one of the most prominent abolitionists. He delivered powerful speeches and wrote extensively about the evils of slavery and the need for its immediate abolition. He founded the North Star, an abolitionist newspaper, and played a key role in the effort to secure passage of the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which officially ended slavery in the United States. Another leader was William Lloyd Garrison. He was a staunch abolitionist who demanded the immediate and unconditional emancipation of all slaves. He founded the New England Anti-Slavery Society in 1832 and published the Liberator, an abolitionist newspaper that became one of the most important voices of the movement. The abolitionist movement employed a variety of tactics to achieve its goals, including moral suasion, which involved appealing to the conscience of slaveholders to end slavery voluntarily. Another tactic was political action, such as working to elect anti-slavery candidates and pass laws to restrict slavery. For example, the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which admitted Missouri as a slave state but prohibited slavery in the Louisiana Purchase north of the 36 degrees north latitude line. Additionally, the movement utilized propaganda and public education to raise awareness about the evils of slavery and to change public opinion. This included the publication of abolitionist newspapers, pamphlets, and books, as well as the organization of public events and lectures. The movement also employed nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience to resist slavery and its enforcement. For example, the nonviolent resistance to the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which required citizens to assist in the return of escaped slaves, led by people like William Still and Levi Coffin, who risked their own freedom to help slaves escape through the Underground Railroad. The movement also had a strong international dimension, with abolitionists in Europe and the Americas working together to end slavery throughout the world. This included the efforts of British abolitionists like William Wilberforce and Zachary Macaulay to end the slave trade and slavery in the British Empire. One of the most important achievements of the abolitionist movement was the ultimate success in ending slavery in most parts of the world. The movement's efforts led to the passage of the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1865, which officially abolished slavery in the United States. Slavery was also abolished in most other countries throughout the 19th century, although its legacy continues to have profound implications for racial and social justice around the world. However, the abolitionist movement also faced significant opposition from pro-slavery forces. Pro-slavery advocates argued that slavery was a necessary evil and that it was justified by the Bible and the Constitution. They claimed that enslaved people were better off in slavery than as free people, and they feared that the abolition of slavery would lead to chaos and disorder. For example, the Southern states strongly opposed any efforts to abolish slavery because it was integral to their economy and way of life. They argued that slavery was necessary to maintain the agricultural economy of the South, and that the abolition of slavery would destroy the social order. To learn more about the reasons why slavery was so deeply rooted in the Southern states, watch our video called "Why Was Slavery So Popular in the South?" In conclusion, the abolitionist movement was a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that emerged from the confluence of several factors that, little by little, led humanity to understand that slavery should be no more. Religious, humanitarian, economic, and social pressures all had their impact on the abolitionist movement. And all these reasons did not appear suddenly. They were the result of centuries of struggle. All these reasons are interconnected and cannot be understood separately from one another. But by studying them individually, we can understand how they led to the end of slavery. The abolitionist movement was not the product of a single event or individual, but the culmination of centuries of struggle against slavery. Various groups and individuals contributed to the movement, employing diverse tactics to achieve their goals. Their efforts ultimately led to the end of slavery in most parts of the world, although its legacy continues to have profound implications for racial and social justice. Studying the abolitionist movement allows us to learn from the struggles and achievements of those who fought for justice and equality and to reflect on the ongoing need for social change in our own time. I hope this video has been helpful to you. If you want to know more about slavery, don't forget to watch the video called "What Was the Origin of Slavery?"